We've seen thousands of people travel to pay their respects for drummer Lee Rigby, people from various religious beliefs, various political beliefs. This is an incident that has stirred up a lot of emotion, not only just here in southeast London, but across the country, and there were concerns that that emotion might overspill. It's here at Scotland Yard that the national investigation has been led, with three separate strands to the inquiry. Firstly, claims against Saville. Then secondly, claims involving Saville and others. And then finally, claims involving others not linked with Saville's offences. And it's under this third strand that it's understood Jim Davidson was arrested. Earlier we were asking the question whether they were local to that area or whether they'd come in on maybe tourists, and it seems that they were on holiday from London, so it's all fingers are pointing at a real tragedy. But now a new way of making money is being rolled out, where users could be charged to send messages. So, under the new system, Hillary, she can still speak to Kate for free because, well, they're friends. Hillary can also speak to Sabina because she's friends with Kate, so they're in the same social circle. But if any of the girls wanted to speak to Vera, who's from Germany, then they'd have to pay money because she's outside of their social circle. Depending on how popular your prospective friend is, will dictate how much you have to pay. Of course, behind me you'll see the police presence on the front door and on the roads around here. Clearly, with the monarch inside, you would expect that kind of security. This seems to be where the problems are starting, and in fact the traffic is now being diverted away from the motorway at this point. But if we now cross over the bridge, you'll see that the traffic that did make it through before they stopped and blocked the motorway off, well, they're stuck here. They're stuck in a long line of traffic heading south down the M23. And for them, they face many hours of uncertainty. And now the two men, both from Lancashire, named Tayyab Zabani, a 30-year-old taxi driver, and Mohammed Safdar, a 42-year-old restaurant worker, were arrested on Friday afternoon after their flight, which was heading for Manchester, was intercepted by an RAF Typhoon fast jet and diverted to the nearby Stansted Airport. Now, George Osborne, as we heard earlier, sounding more like a Jedi than a Chancellor, said that the force is strong with this one. Well, perhaps it's not the force that's brought Lucasfilm here to the UK, but instead those tax breaks. And over the last 5 years, hundreds of filmmakers have been brought to the UK for the same reason. This news wasn't due to be broken until the end of next week with the list of all of the operational honours and awards from last summer. And in fact, I imagine that there were quite a few surprised faces here at the MOD this morning when they saw that the news had broken across several of the newspapers. So therefore, the details are fairly sparse. What we do know is that Corporal Ashworth has been awarded the VC for actions that took place whilst he was on patrol in the Nari Siraj district of Helmand province in June last year. To be honest, I'm no expert, but when you see firefighters wearing life jackets, it usually means the signs aren't good. From droughts and heat waves through to downpours and floods.
The crop has just stayed saturated in the ground and not been able to grow properly.
For potato farmers, the adverse conditions have meant that many of their crops have been ruined, slashing production by almost a quarter on last year.
It's just so wet, as you can see, the amount of moisture in the soil still.
Well, quite simply, they're saying that they don't want the EDL's money, and specifically they don't want Tommy Robinson's money. In this vehicle next to me is the Kandak commander. He's currently on the radio coordinating his warriors as they push forward. At the moment, the British troops are sat on this high ground, overlooking them, waiting for a gap to develop before they follow on behind. Whilst no formal identification has yet taken place, the police and authorities are working closely to support the family of Suzanne Norman. So what started off as a search and rescue operation is now into the recovery phase, although within the last few minutes we have seen some activity outside the house which suggests that maybe a body has been removed. After only a few hours sleep, the men of A Company are back on patrol and closing in on their objective. But the enemy are ready and they are waiting. And soon the silence of a Kenyan dawn is shattered. But these are well-practiced drills, and the enemy are dealt with swiftly. However, what's waiting around the corner is far more unfamiliar. as their mission this time is to look for chemical weapons.
Gas! Sorry, Charlie 1, gas! Gas! Davies! We're getting off here, we're going to pull back, go for the decontamination line. Everyone looks the same. No one can hear what you're saying because everything's completely muffled. You're shouting everything at the top of your lungs just to try and get the message across. It's not their fault if they can't hear it because they've got extra ears in their ears. But because you're shouting at full volume, it just drains you as well.
To make matters worse, the sun's now up, which means the temperature's rising. And it's not long before the soldiers start to feel the heat. Even taking on water in such an environment has its problems.
Right, 1 platoon, how to move.
It's tricky, yeah. I mean, you can get some, but it all depends on the seal you make and how tightly you squeeze the bottle. But it's definitely not as easy as just opening a lid and pouring it down.
Don't touch him. Try to stay away from his. That's it.
After the troops have come into contact with the chemical weapons, they are then decontaminated. But despite modern technology, the ultimate test still remains when the Sergeant Major picks 2 of the soldiers, asks them to break the seal on their respirator, breathe in the air to see whether it's safe.
Just breathe normally, 10 seconds.
An order he hopes he'll never have to give for real, but with next year's role in the Airborne Task Force, he knows it's always a possibility.
I'm just watching for 5 minutes.
We haven't done this stuff for a good few years, certainly not before Afghanistan. So now people are starting to switch on to the fact that it is a threat and we could potentially go out to one of these places and deal with it.
So whilst this was just a drill, the men of A Company are in no doubt why this training is back on the agenda.
The idea of fighting in a civilian environment is not appealing to anyone. You just know the dangers. It changes warfare really. But then again, that's what we're paid to do. Someone needs to do it. Rather we go in than they drop a bomb on some civvies. So that's why we have to do this training.
Training they hope they'll never have to call upon, but the paras are taking no chances and preparing for the worst in order to be ready for anything. James Banks, Forces News, Kenya.
Open up these space ins, let's go.
In the small seaside resort of Penarth, just outside Cardiff, Tina Selby has for the last 12 months been leading a campaign to knit woolly hats for troops on tour in Afghanistan.
I used to send out boxes to the troops, morale boosting boxes, and I thought, oh, why not send a hat? And then I thought, why not send a whole box of hats? And it sort of escalated from there, really. People are desperate to knit because they want to help, they want to show support.
The idea soon caught on, and she's now sent woolly hats of all shapes and sizes to deployed troops from across the armed forces.
We have all sorts of different designs and what have you. It's whatever people fancy to knit. And to be honest, as long as they're a little bit of stretchy, a little bit of give, it'll fit all sizes. And there's so many hats, different shapes and sizes, I'm sure they can all swap them around and decide whatever they fancy.
When Tina realised that she needed an army of knitters to help her with the demand, she knew she didn't have far to look. And before long, she'd recruited a willing band of volunteers from her local line dancing class. Captain James Burnett was sent one of Tina's hats last year, whilst deployed on Op Herrick 13.
I couldn't thank them enough. Them sitting at home, taking the time to knit hats for the guys who really appreciate it, keeping them warm. With Herrick 15 just around the corner and the temperatures are going to start dropping, there's no better time to redo it. And when they look as good as this, keep knitting. The guys appreciate it. Thanks very much.
But James isn't alone in his praise for the ladies of Penarth. And Tina is frequently sent photos and letters from the lucky recipients of the hats.
It's lovely to see the boys wearing them and for them to know that we're thinking about them.
Wonderful, really good. Didn't realise that my knitting could come to some use.
My mother did the knitting in the second big war, so carrying on a bit of a tradition, I suppose, really.
Tina's campaign has now caught the imagination of knitters throughout the UK. Whilst the headquarters of her operation will always be here in South Wales, she regularly receives hats and donations from an ever-increasing number of new recruits. What started off as a campaign to knit 500 woolly hats for Welsh soldiers has over the last 12 months gone from strength to strength. Tina and her army of knitters have now made over 4,000 woolly hats, keeping many a soldier's head warm on a cold Afghan night. James Banks, Forces News, South Wales.
Push left, put up a snap ambush, go firm, listen and wait, and then go and roll the position.
As one senior NCO said to me, being a para is all about getting the basics right. And that's exactly what they're aiming to do here in Kenya.
Right, whilst we're peeling, what are you looking for? Decent cover.
Gone are the relative luxuries of the forward operating bases in Helmand. Now they're rediscovering the art of self-reliance, surviving with what they can carry and silently occupying tactical camps known as harbour areas.
We've done a quick walkthrough, talk-through up at the top there, just a bit of a reminder of the base from the men. We've walked in, we've just gone into the occupation of the harbour, so we started off back there, went into a snap ambush. The boss will decide whether this is suitable and whether we're going to stay here. If it is, we'll go into a work phase.
Which in military terms means digging, and lots of it. Something the Afghan veterans in the company have not had to endure for years. But for many of A Company, Afghanistan is just something that they've heard about, or even just something they've seen on TV. For over half of the company are more or less straight out of basic training, which means for them it's not about remembering forgotten skills, but instead about learning new ones. Take Private Rodney Finesse. He arrived at 3 Para just 9 weeks ago. A steep learning curve, certainly, but thanks to the more experienced soldiers, he and the other new arrivals are learning fast.
They know their job inside out, and there's some good soldiers here. It's good to be around them because they you're aspiring to be as good as them, so automatically you're on a winner straight away because the blokes know what they're doing.
At 8 hour.
Something the man commanding A Company will be glad to hear, especially as he only took charge the day before they flew to Africa.
3 platoon, you are to assault immediately. The young lads, they are wide-eyed, they are in the middle of an African bush. They're digging holes and they've been told there's loads of stuff out there which are going to bite them.
What are you hoping to achieve in the next couple of days?
To get a really new bunch of people, me included, just used to working together. And all I want from the blokes is just an understanding of what they should be doing, working within their sections.
So whilst the short-term goal for the company might be modest, the long-term one is far more ambitious, to be ready for its place next year in the UK's Rapid Reaction Airborne Task Force.
Lads, watch your right flank! Watch your right flank!
James Banks, Forces News, Kenya.
Lads, you need to get that casualty back here.
Hundreds of cyclists taking part in this year's event. Their journey began in Greenwich Park, southeast London. The 4-day challenge attracts a wide variety of riders, each with their own individual story and reason for taking part.
In 2005, I was involved in the London bombing. I cannot profess to say what it must be like on the front line for those troops. I had a taste of probably a very small margin of what they go through, and what I saw that day with the devastation and bodies all over the tracks was horrific.
I got raked into it after a concert at Southwark Cathedral for the Royal British Legion. Everyone's so kind, and everyone's just there to get to know each other, have a chat, and you get to know, why people are doing it, their background, their life stories, and why it's important to them personally.
Since leaving Greenwich Park, the Pedal to Paris cyclists have ridden almost 300 miles. Shortly they'll arrive here on the Champs-Élysées, and when they do, this famous cobbled street will be closed to the public, and they'll be escorted to their finish line next to the Arc de Triomphe.
It's been a tremendous experience without question. Marvellous team building event, and the fundraising that's gone on, the stories we've been hearing during the week. I'd be surprised if it's less than £600,000, which is an amazing achievement.
After being reunited with their families and celebrating with a couple of drinks, the cyclists were then presented with their medals, before another successful Pedal to Paris was concluded with a service under the Arc de Triomphe at the side of the tomb of the unknown soldier. James Banks, Forces News, Paris.